If everyone saw her that night, how did no one see what happened? She wasn't alone that night. She was surrounded by friends seen by multiple people walking through a busy college town. But by sunrise, she was gone. No screams, no witnesses, no trace. And the strangest part? Everyone who saw her that night has a different story. Everyone knows something, but no one is talking. Chapter 1. A normal night. Bloomington, Indiana, is the kind of college town that feels suspended in a kind of eternal youth. The streets hum with energy after dark. Music bleeds through apartment windows. Laughter echoes down walkways lined with trees. Indiana University sits at the heart of it all. A campus where thousands of students arrive each fall carrying backpacks, ambitions, and the unshakable belief that nothing bad could ever happen to them here. Lauren Spierer arrived at Indiana University the way most students do, with plans, with friends, with a future. She was 20 years old. She was from Edgemont, New York. She was small in stature, just 5 feet 2 inches tall. But those who knew her say she filled a room. She was social, warm, the kind of person who made friends easily. She laughed loud and meant it. She was a sophomore, still finding her footing, still writing the story of who she was going to become. Her apartment was in a building on North College Avenue, close to the bars, close to the social pulse of campus life. She had her people, a small orbit of friends she trusted, people she'd grown comfortable with over months of late nights, and shared classes and casual routines. It was, by all accounts, an ordinary life. A good life. The kind that doesn't announce itself as fragile until the moment it shatters. Thursday, June 2nd, 2011 began the way so many nights begin in a college town. There was no particular occasion, no celebration, no reason to remember it above any other Thursday. It was warm, the kind of early June warmth that makes the idea of going out feel obvious. Laura made plans. She got ready. She stepped out into the evening with no reason to believe it would be anything other than just another night. She had no idea it would be her last. Chapter 2. The party begins. The night started at a dorm on campus. Lauren was with friends, a loose, comfortable group who moved the way college students move, without schedule, without agenda, pulled from one place to the next by music and mood, and whoever had the most convincing idea. They drank. That part is not in dispute. It was the kind of night where drinks were poured and cups were refilled and the edges of everything softened into warmth. From the dorm, the group moved. That's how these nights work. You start somewhere, and then somewhere else calls. An apartment here, a bar there. The geography of a college night is rarely a straight line. It bends and folds back on itself, shaped by wherever the people are, wherever the energy is highest. Lauren moved with the group, part of the fabric of the night, present and accounted for and laughing. There's footage. Security cameras caught glimpses of her across the night. She appeared at certain addresses. She was seen entering certain buildings. The timeline, pieced together later by investigators, shows a young woman moving through her world, surrounded by people who knew her name, who cared about her, who were there with her every step of the way. And yet, the details that seemed unremarkable in the moment would later become the obsession of investigators, journalists, and thousands of people who would spend years trying to understand what the cameras missed, what memories had distorted, what no one thought to pay attention to because there was no reason, not yet, to think they should. The night was normal, and then quietly it wasn't. Chapter 3. Something feels off. There's a particular kind of shift that happens when a night tips from fun to something else. It's subtle at first. Someone drinks a little more than they meant to. Their words start to blur. Their movements become slightly imprecise. The people around them notice, maybe, but in the context of a party, in the context of a night that's supposed to be easy, that noticing rarely translates into action. Witnesses who were with Lauren during the evening would later describe her as intoxicated. Not alarmingly so, not at first, but as the night wore on, her condition deteriorated. This is confirmed by multiple accounts, though the specifics vary depending on who you ask. She had been drinking. She was unsteady. She was, by any reasonable definition, vulnerable. Vulnerability in a crowd is a strange thing. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still be invisible in the truest sense. Everyone around you is managing their own night, their own level of intoxication, their own conversations and dramas and small private worlds. The person next to you can be struggling, and the signal simply doesn't break through the noise. Those who were with Lauren that night have said, in various ways, that they were aware she wasn't fully herself. They were aware she had been drinking heavily. They made note of it the way people sometimes do, with a glance, with a brief check-in, with the assumption that everything would be fine because everything is usually fine. That assumption is not a crime. It is human. It is the kind of decision made 1,000 times every night on 1,000 different college campuses, and most of the time, nothing terrible comes of it. You look back and say, we should have been more careful, and you mean it, but the lesson arrives too late. Something was off. The night was shifting, and no one quite understood yet that this moment, this particular shift, was going to matter more than any other. Chapter 4. The Fall. At some point during the night, Lauren fell. She lost her footing and went down, hitting her head. It happened the way accidents happen on nights like these, suddenly, without warning, in the middle of movement and noise and the general chaos of people in motion. She was helped up. She was checked on, and then the night continued. The decision to keep going is one that haunts the account of that evening. Not because it was callous. It wasn't necessarily. Intoxicated people fall. People hit their heads and stand back up and shake it off and keep moving. The human body is resilient, and the human tendency is to assume that resilience. You check on someone, they seem okay, and you proceed. But a fall like that, in that condition at that hour, is the kind of event that in retrospect becomes a hinge. Before the fall, there is one version of the night. After the fall, there is another. Lauren's physical state after that moment is a matter of some uncertainty. She had already been drinking heavily. She had now taken a blow to the head. How she was feeling, what she was experiencing internally, whether she was more impaired than she appeared. These are questions that would later become significant and unanswerable. No one called an ambulance. No one took her home. No one sat with her in a quiet room and said, "You've had enough. Let's get you somewhere safe." The logic of the night, that she was okay, that people were watching, that nothing truly dangerous could happen in a college town on a warm June evening, held. There is a specific weight that comes with understanding these moments in retrospect. The weight of knowing that the turn was right there, and it was missed, not out of malice, not out of indifference, but out of the ordinary human failure to recognize when ordinary has ended and something else has begun. Lauren fell. She got back up, and the night kept moving. Chapter 5. The Last Group Moments. The hours between the fall and the final sighting are a tangle of movement and memory. The group was still together, more or less. Apartments were visited. Conversations happened. People came and went. Time passed in the way time passes when you're not watching it, unevenly, with gaps. Lauren was seen at multiple locations during this period. She interacted with people. She spoke. She moved. The precise texture of these interactions, what was said, how she seemed, whether anyone understood the degree of her vulnerability, is something that survivors of the night have described in inconsistent terms. Inconsistency in accounts of events like this is not unusual. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction, and reconstruction is shaped by emotion, by guilt, by the desire to make sense of something senseless. When investigators began asking questions in the days following Lauren's disappearance, the people who had been with her that night were not giving statements from a clear emotional distance. They were frightened, confused, grieving, and in some cases, uncertain about their own liability. Their accounts reflected all of that. What the accounts do agree on, broadly, Lauren was present. Lauren was intoxicated. The group was moving between locations in the North College Avenue area. At some point, the tight social fabric of the evening began to fray. People separated. The group dynamic that had held through the earlier hours of the night became less cohesive. And Lauren, somewhere in that unraveling, became less supervised, less watched, less anchored to the people who might have kept her safe. It happened gradually and then all at once. One moment, she was part of the night. The next moment, she was at its edge. And then she was beyond it. Chapter 6. The Last Sighting. The last confirmed sighting of Lauren Spierer was captured by a security camera. The timestamp reads approximately 4:30 in the morning on June 3, 2011. The footage shows Lauren on foot, moving through the quiet streets near her apartment. She is alone. She is barefoot. Barefoot. That detail has lodged itself in the public consciousness of this case in a way that is difficult to explain but easy to understand. There's something about it that speaks to the texture of the night, the length of it, the loss of ordinary small protections, the way the hours had stripped away even the basic armor of shoes. It tells you something about the state she was in, about how far she had traveled from the beginning of the evening. She was approximately a block from her apartment building. She was moving in the direction of home. She was, by every rational measure, close. Close enough that the mind wants to finish the story, wants to follow her the remaining distance, wants to see the door open and close behind her. But the camera only captures one angle, one moment, and then she moves out of frame. No other camera picks her up. No one calls in a sighting. No one comes forward to say they saw her, spoke to her, passed her on the sidewalk. In a college town, at 4:30 in the morning, on streets that are never truly empty, Lauren Spierer walks out of one camera's sight and into a silence that is never broken. That image, small, barefoot, alone, nearly home, is the last piece of documented evidence that Lauren Spierer existed in the world. Everything after it is theory. Chapter 7. The Disappearance. When Lauren did not come home, no one immediately knew. The hours that followed her last sighting passed the way early morning hours pass. In sleep, in silence, in the slow world of people who have no reason yet to be afraid. Her phone went silent. This is one of the details investigators would later examine closely. A phone in the possession of a living, conscious person generates activity, calls, texts, location pings. Lauren's phone stopped generating that kind of signal. It was not receiving calls in the way a phone receives calls when it is with its owner in the ordinary world. By the time her absence became undeniable, by the time the people in her life began to make the calls that precede a missing person report, hours had passed. The trail, whatever trail existed, had grown cold in the warm June morning. Her family was notified. They came to Bloomington. The agony of what followed, the days of searching, the flyers, the public pleas, the desperate hope that she had simply wandered somewhere and would be found, is the kind of agony that is almost impossible to fully understand from the outside. A daughter, a sister, a young woman who had been present and laughing only hours before, now simply absent, with no explanation and no trace. The search was extensive. The White River was searched. Dumpsters and dumpster areas near the route she might have walked were searched. Volunteers and law enforcement covered the ground between her last known location and her apartment, between her apartment and every place she might conceivably have ended up. They found nothing. Lauren Spierer had vanished from a crowded college town in the middle of the night, a block from her home, and left behind no physical evidence, no witnesses, no answers. The silence she disappeared into was total. Chapter 8. The Timeline Problems. When investigators began reconstructing the night in detail, they ran into a problem that would define the entire investigation. The accounts didn't fully align. The people who had been with Lauren described events that, when placed side by side, contained gaps, contradictions, and moments that simply didn't cohere into a single coherent narrative. Some of the inconsistencies were small, the kind of minor discrepancies you'd expect from multiple people recalling a night of heavy drinking. Timestamps off by 20 minutes. The order of events slightly scrambled. Details remembered by one person that another had no memory of at all. But some of the inconsistencies were harder to dismiss. There were windows of time that no account adequately explained. There were movements and locations that witnesses placed Lauren at that didn't fully square with the camera footage. There are things people said they did or didn't do that raise questions no one has ever fully answered. The legal terrain around Lauren's case became complicated quickly. Several individuals who were present during portions of the night retained attorneys and declined to speak further with investigators beyond a certain point. This is a legal right. It is also, in the context of a missing person investigation, a reality that law enforcement found profoundly frustrating. None of the people who were with Lauren that night have ever been charged in connection with her disappearance. Investigators have stated that they have persons of interest. Lauren's family has been vocal about their belief that people who know what happened have chosen not to come forward. The legal and moral questions that surround the witnesses to that night exist in a complicated space. One where what is legally permissible and what is morally complete are not the same thing. The timeline has holes. The holes have never been filled. And the people who could potentially fill them have, for their own reasons, chosen silence. Chapter 9. The theories. In the absence of answers, theories fill the space. They always do. The human mind is built to resolve incompleteness, to find patterns, to construct narratives, to arrive at explanations that make unbearable uncertainty bearable. In the case of Lauren Spierer, the theories have proliferated over more than a decade, each one carrying its own logic, its own weight, its own heartbreak. The accident theory holds that Lauren, in the condition she was in, heavily intoxicated, disoriented, barefoot, alone in the early morning hours, fell victim to the simple physics of vulnerability. The White River runs not far from where she was last seen. The terrain between her last confirmed location and her apartment offers possibilities for a fall, a stumble, an accidental ending that had nothing to do with any other person's intentions. People in Lauren's condition have drowned in rivers, have fallen into places from which they could not recover. This theory offers no villain, only a tragic collision of circumstances. The overdose theory follows a similar logic. Lauren had been drinking for hours. She had fallen and hit her head. She was alone in the early morning. If she lost consciousness somewhere between the camera and her door, in an alley, in a space between buildings, somewhere off the path, the outcome could have been determined before anyone knew to look for her. If someone discovered her in that state, the decisions made in that moment of panic could explain the absence of a body, the absence of evidence, the persistent silence. The cover-up theory is the one that Lauren's family has most forcefully suggested. It holds that Lauren did not disappear alone, that someone or multiple people know exactly what happened, know exactly where she is, and have made a collective decision to protect themselves at the cost of giving her family the truth. The inconsistencies in witness accounts, the attorneys, the silence, all of it, in this theory, points to a group of people who saw something and have chosen, for more than a decade, not to speak. The abduction theory ventures into darker territory still. A stranger, a predator, someone who watched the night unfold from a distance and recognized in Lauren's condition and opportunity. This theory has the least evidentiary support. There was no vehicle seen, no struggle reported, no evidence of a forcible encounter. But the absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. And in a case with so many unanswered questions, nothing can be fully ruled out. None of these theories has been proven. None has been disproven. They exist in a state of permanent suspension, each one a different kind of answer to the same haunting question, each one containing its own specific grief. Chapter 10. The Unanswered Question. Lauren Spierer has been missing for more than 13 years. She was declared legally dead in 2019, a procedural necessity that her family pursued not as an acceptance of loss, but as a practical measure in the ongoing effort to find answers. Her parents, Charlene and Robert Spierer, have never stopped. They have never stepped back from the effort to find out what happened to their daughter. They have spoken publicly, tirelessly, with a grief that has not diminished with time, but has instead become something harder and more permanent, like a stone worn smooth. What they want is simple and impossible. They want to know where Lauren is. They want to bring her home. They want the people who know things to say those things out loud, in the light where they can finally be heard. The investigation remains technically open. Cold cases have been solved after longer silences than this one. Memories shift. Circumstances change. People who once had reasons to stay quiet sometimes find, with the passage of years, that the weight of what they know has become heavier than the cost of saying it. Or they don't. Sometimes the silence holds. Sometimes the people who know the shape of a terrible thing carry it with them quietly for the rest of their lives, and the truth never surfaces, and the family never gets to grieve completely, and the question hangs unanswered across the years like a note that never resolves. Lauren Spierer went out on a Thursday evening in June of 2011. She was 20 years old. She was surrounded by people who knew her name. She walked through a college town she knew well, in a neighborhood she lived in 1 block from her door. She was not alone that night. She was seen. She was surrounded. She was, by every ordinary measure, safe. And then she was gone. If everyone saw her that night, how did no one see what happened?
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you think a little deeper, don't forget to support the channel. Tap the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Your support means everything. It helps bring more powerful stories like this to life. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone else who needs to see it. See you in the next one.